Okay, so a little bit of an emergency show. Did not realize that for the States, Super Rugby starts tomorrow. So let's discuss some opening topics. Let's get into some nitty gritty and some interesting news coming out of the South Pacific. Let's go.
I need all the wins, yeah. Ain't no L's, I gotta get it, no call and quits, yeah. Gotta keep on moving no matter how hard.
Here comes Danny Tusizawa, back to Baker, Baker with the fin. Kurt Baker in for DC, and this may well do it old glory with the try. The New Zealand Sevens legend, Kurt Baker with the cherry on top.
Can you believe it?
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the On the Line Rugby podcast, a show brought to you by the Believe Sports Network. I'm your host, Mike Nagaishi, and welcome back. We're back in our new location, but again, excuse the noises. So let's kind of work around that. So play a little second fiddle right now to Princess Potato and friends as they constantly move around my couch. But yeah, back at the original set. Okay. I think the biggest thing that we need to discuss as Super Rugby lineups have released over the last 24 hours is basically more questions than answers. I was not really surprised at a lot of the opening lineups that I saw this weekend. A lot of debutants, a lot of new guys coming from new clubs. Specifically, I think the biggest highlight that everyone's talking about is Alex Hodgman starting for the Blue. Sorry, not the Blues anymore, the Reds. I think that's warranted. He's one of the better props in Super Rugby. But just stuff like that, a lot of more of the same, not really anything razzly-dazzly, I guess, on that regard. More along the lines of what I expected, especially with Harry Potter debuting off the starting 15 for the Force up to him and Ben Donaldson. I expect a good game. But I think these are my real big questions after looking at all the lineups. I feel like you'll get more out of this, obviously, than me just discussing all 23s for 12 teams. So obviously a lot of stars looking to be on the bench. I think for a lot of people that don't realize it, it makes a lot of sense, at least opening week. A lot of these matches outside of really the Chiefs and Crusaders are a lot of I'm not going to say winnable games, but I will say it's more of the cupcake matches that you're going to see. So it obviously makes a lot of sense. A lot of teams are going to try to experiment, even if they're, guys are healthy, try to get in these new combos, get them experience, get them blood, start the year off with some debutants, get more people in the seats. But I was kind of surprised, given that some of the lineups decisions that I will talk about a little later were on the bench, like Nella Tupou. I think maybe that was just to, give him a little bit of tread off the tires with his new team. That kind of makes sense. But as for some others that we'll discuss later, it was a little concerning, I guess, in my opinion. Specifically, one of that I didn't even know was a thing was that Akira Ioane has a calf injury. Now, don't get me wrong, I probably should have kept track of the Super Rugby injuries, given the fact that he's on in my fantasy team, or was now. Obviously, he's gone, but I thought it would be an interesting topic to see where they're going to go, looking at that yesterday with the 6 jersey, and then I come to find out it was Anton Segner. Obviously really proud of the guy. When you watched him debut, I believe it was during the COVID year of 2021, the guy really showed out off the bench. He has great jackling. His ability to just move and play off the ball and especially run support lines on the wing was exceptional. He brings a lot of power to the table. He has a little bit of wiggle with that speed, and I'm happy to see him go. First German player, I believe, in Super Rugby history when he debuted. So up to him. I really think that he can give it a good go. I think Vern Cotter's doing a good job with trying to see what combos he can meld, especially in that back row that's always hurt. Always you look at Dalton Papali'i over the last 4 years, he's always gone down with something. Hoskins Tutu over the last couple of years, he's been a little sensitive. Obviously, Akira Ioane, he's like fragile like glass. So I think if you look at that back row, that's probably one of the biggest questions on the Blues team in terms of lineup combos. And I think putting in Segner in early to just try to plug him in, let him learn a little bit from Dalton and Hoskins, I think will be a great choice for them moving forward. I obviously, a lot of the articles, specifically the New Zealand Herald, specifically only say that Hoskins will be out. I mean, not Hoskins, Akira, will be only out for the opening weekend, at least guaranteed. But as we've seen with calf injuries, they linger. For all my NFL fans, we all know that Joe Burrow was out most of the offseason and a lot of this year with a calf injury. Obviously, he tried to play through it, but his play diminished significantly. I would expect the Blues to maybe run on the edge of caution with this, depending on how severe it is. Given that he missed most of the tour in Japan, I would imagine it's pretty bad. So I would imagine him, at least in a theoretical landscape, to be out for at least the first month of Super Rugby, just to kind of see how he is. Maybe bring him off the bench in the third week, just to kind of see like where you can get mileage-wise without it cramping up on him or any type of strain. So we'll see on that. Obviously, a calf is really important when you're playing 6 or 7. So it'll be an interesting sight to see. I definitely think that Segner, I'm not going to say he could take the role over, but I think if he learns enough and obviously develops in that role significantly, I think he'll see more time. Whether that's Akira off the bench or Dalton off the bench early, or hell, he couldn't even change my mind and maybe take the role over in about 5 weeks. So I think it all depends really on how long Akira is out, and we can reevaluate from there. If it's longer than a month, I think Segner has it for the rest of the year, but we'll see off of that. As for another one, I think is a big question for me is whether Duplessis Karifi will manage to keep his preseason form. In the few games that I did manage to watch, a lot of them were Hurricane games and Highlander games, just because preseason with Super Rugby was kind of weird on NZR Plus. But, I really did think he's almost close to being back to his debut in early year form. I know he did kind of fall off the last couple years for whatever reason. I'm not sure if it was just, injury or being, displaced a little bit. Obviously, last year he was kind of thrown to the side with Iyose and friends, but he looked good. And I mean, off the ball, I think that was the biggest thing that I loved watching him was his intensity on the line. Yes, he could carry the ball very well, and yes, he played good defense, and he hits very hard. But I think what really got me to like him early when he was with the Canes was his ability to jackal, and that was on full display in the preseason. I was really excited to see him move and kind of be more of that elusive runner. He seems to have lost a little bit of weight. Maybe that's because he bulked up a little bit, and that's maybe why he lost a little bit of them wheels. But now he seems to be in renewed form. So I think it would be interesting to see how he carries his form this year, especially against a lot of decent teams on that docket for the Hurricanes, specifically in that opening weekend. They play the Western Force. They're going to try to bully them. We'll talk about them a little bit later. But if you look at the way look at the way that lineup is really working, I really think that Karifi can dig himself an impressive hole. Obviously with the new changing regime, a little bit of defensive scheme, they play a little bit more open. I think that lends itself to Karifi's style. So, hey, let things be where they be, and I think in about 3 weeks we'll finally know if Duplessis Karifi is here to stay, at least on a Super Rugby form. I really do think he should. I had to replace Akira Ioane with him. Spoiler alert on my Super Brew team. So here's crossing my fingers. I'm personally invested in this. Don't screw this up. Another one I probably would say is interesting is where the hell is Matt Proctor at? For all those who don't know, Matt Proctor got traded to the Rebels. He comes over from the Northampton Saints, who obviously, as I've talked about in the last couple of weeks, have been experiencing a little bit of a financial woe. I really expected a lot. Matt Proctor and Billy Proctor were some of the better players that I've seen when I've been watching Super Rugby, at least in the centers lineup, and he wasn't even in the starting lineup. No word on injuries, nothing, no word on bad camp performance. I was a little shocked, if I'm being totally honest, just because, when you look at a guy with Proctor's form, his ability to then, keep the ball in hand, move, have impressive power, but still be able to grub and kick, I thought he would have brought a lot to the Rebels table, at least in terms of opening up that area, especially with Vunivalu and those boys. They have a lot of, running ball hand and threats. He could easily slot into 12. I don't know why they are sequestering him to not in the opening lineup. I thought it would be a great chance to blood him out against the Brumbies. The Brumbies are probably the most maybe physical team in Super Rugby, at least on the Australian standpoint. I would say outside of Fiji, which is technically in the Australian side of the conference. But I think more news has to come out on him. I really wanted him to be out this year. I hope it's not an injury that no one's disclosing, but here's to crossing my fingers. Another guy on my fantasy team I would love to see. For all those who haven't watched his highlights, please do. Old Matt Proctor highlights are really nice, especially from his 2019 year before he left to sign with Northampton. I hope he comes back in the lineup in the next couple weeks. But let's move on. I think these last couple will really hit interestingly for most people. When you look at the Chiefs specifically, you have two real storylines, at least in that matchup with the Crusaders. You have obviously Rivez Reihana being in that starting lineup for the Satyrs and debuting against his former club for the first time really on the pitch. Do I think he was given a fair shot at the Chiefs? I think Gats and Clayton would have obviously given him probably the most shake that he can probably get in that jersey. I just don't understand how he couldn't beat out the likes of a Josh Ioane, who I've said it a couple times. Yes, he's good with ball in hand and as a manager, but I don't think he could change the game. Rivez Reihana has been that guy in the provincial landscape and the academy scape for a long time. Watching him play with Cortez Ratima, I really thought that they were going to be the future for the Chiefs should DMAC leave. And, it kind of showed when they had to bring back Caleb Trask, who I thought shouldn't have left the Chiefs in the first place, that Reihana just wasn't it for whatever reason. So I think it'll be a nice and interesting thing to see for all those fantasy players. If Reihana does pretty good, I think you can easily slot him in your lineup. He'll be there, especially with, the likes of Sevu Reese coming back from an injury. Maka Springer still kind of being a little bit nagged by that injury from the World Cup. And, if you just look at the lineup, there's a lot of opening spaces. There's a lot to really gleam out of that opening weekend with a lot of these teams simply because of the amount of coaching changes that have been in the offseason. So if you can impress in this opening weekend, you're probably going to be set for the next at least month or so with hopefully getting in that starting lineup consideration. Reihana could do it. I think the Satyrs, if they continue to have that developmental system of just plugging and playing guys from their academy, or as, I guess I would like to call it formerly the Razor Rehabilitation for Coaches and Players team, you have a lot of hope that Reihana will get back to his former provincial NPC form and he'll just come out of the gate swinging. And I think versus an old club, they're going to leave him in for all 80 or at least a good 60 and just let him wreck house for a couple phases. I think that'll be an interesting one. Another one that I'm sure everyone's talking about is the return of Quinn Tupaia to the 13 jersey for the Chiefs. Him and Anton Leonard-Brown will be a great combo in the middle. Leonard-Brown, another one coming back off an injury. I really expect them to kind of feed off of each other. Obviously, Leonard-Brown is more of the runner distributor. Perfect one for the center jersey for the Chiefs. I really thought Daniel Rona or any of those other guys that they had last year were really going to be able to slot in and take the spot from Tupaia just because of the fact that he's lost in mass, I guess I could say. He looks a little bit smaller since that knee injury. I'm not sure if he's lost the weight either through PT or just because he wanted to get lighter and a little bit faster. But it'll be interesting to see how he reacts to that newfound weight in that center jersey, especially against the Crusaders, who are known to be very physical in the trenches. Obviously they got Scott Barrett. I'm going to be really excited to see him take a couple lineups and just run it straight down into someone's throat and see if he can break the line. A lot of people, you're not the same coming off a knee injury. Myself in particular, had a couple knee surgeries myself. But, you look at a guy with that kind of explosiveness and that kind of athleticism, I definitely think that while you may not be as affected as, say, for all my NFL fans, and OBJ is, I don't think he'll be that kind of Adrian Peterson-esque where he comes off better than ever off that ACL. So I think it's a good opening time to watch Clayton McMillan kind of play with that. I don't even know how long he's going to be on the field. For all I know, they could throw Daniel Rona in at half. I think it all just depends on how comfortable Quinn Tupaia feels and how his performance is going to be. Because, there's no better way to test out your performance of your surgery against than really the Satyrs or the Drua. So excited to see that. And I think these two will kind of be interesting. How does Lola Sio continue to get the starting nod at 10 for the Brumbies? I kind of expected him not to, with not only, as I've talked about, his destroyed confidence from, the Eddie Jones era, from the Dave Rennie era, kind of the Cheka era, but I personally have. I think everyone who knows me personally knows this. I don't think he's it and anything along those lines for a 10. I think he's a little bit too underconfident. He has a little bit of problems when someone gets in his face, at least physically, just to be able to continue to give that ball away. And on top of that, off the tee, once he gets a little bit off his mark, he's done. I think we saw that over the last couple years. There's the notorious he missed 8 in 2 weeks. And there was one where he missed 5 last year. He has a problem that I think needs to be fixed. I don't know what kind of dirt he has on Brumby's staff or ownership, but something has to be there, because that guy should probably be on the bench, or at least developing behind someone else. Maybe bring in bring back Christian Liliafano. I don't know. Anybody. Just bring them back, please. Lima Sopoaga, get him from the Landers. I don't know. There has to be something to just pull Noah out that lineup. I definitely think there's better guys out there, especially in the Australian landscape. With the Rebels probably going to be folding, you have a shot at Carter Gordon, maybe, or Andrew Kellaway. You have to get somebody, bar none, just somebody. And I definitely think that you have options in this next year. So perhaps this is a make it or break it year. I thought that make it or break it year should have came and went a long time ago, but such is life. I'm just going to be kind of blunt on being that low on him. And I think the last one, which is probably one of the more interesting ones, is how will the Drua fare this year without their big group of stars? Obviously they lost Kelaveti Ravovo. They've lost, obviously, their former winger. I'm blanking on the name, but he went to Racing 92 in France and balled out. You lose a bunch of your forwards. I don't know how they're going to fare. And with the Blues, which is probably going to be their closest opponent in terms of not really talent, but in scheme, because of Vern Cotter, it'll be interesting to see how they match up. Both of those teams are just going to be like the San Diego Legion and just try to swing that out wide, let things go where they go, and YOLO ball all the way to the end zone. It'll be a defensive battle. And I think for the Drua, how this started last year, you really have to look at how penalties really screwed them late, especially in the last 10 minutes. Fiji just tends to lose their composure. I really hope that they can hold it. Fiji and the Drua could easily have won, or at least have gotten farther in the playoffs, if they didn't let the ref determine the outcome of the game. They definitely could have won a lot more games to put themselves in a higher position as well. When you look at a lot of the options that they have, they still have Yosef Omasi, they still have Droase, they still have a lot of those boys on that team. Tevita and Canaveri, they have Masake Doge. They have a lot of boys on that lineup, and a lot of debutants coming out too. So this is not only just an evaluation of a period. I think this is going to be the benchmark for the rest of the year. No other team plays closer like them than the Blues. They've already beaten the Brumbies. They've already beaten the Chiefs. I think they have an easy shot of running the table and getting the number 2 seed this year in Super Rugby. I know it's kind of an very early hot take, but I'm telling you guys, the Fijian Drua are coming to play. I really think that they can put it on for everyone on the table and show that Fiji deserves a spot on the table in terms of being a tier 1 top tier nation again. It's going to be an interesting year for Super Rugby. I can't wait for tomorrow's matchup. Chiefs and Crusaders to open the weekend. We got to love it, and it'll be an interesting go. As for scores, I'll just do these in what I would say would be the normal order for TV lineups. I really just got the Chiefs by 3, taking it 24-21 against the Satyrs. I know it's going to be a tight game. I know it's probably going to come off to the boot of Damon McKenzie, or maybe a late try by Sean Stevenson, but it's going to be a trenches battle game. It's going to be to the point where the Chiefs are going to have to make sure that their mistakes in the prior, 3 matches that they've played against them do not happen again. The Chiefs of late have always knocked the ball on, lost balls in the breakdown, or had offsides penalties late on the goal line. They got to fix those things up. And if not, that gives obviously the Satyrs, who are just going to play clinical, an easy chance to score. Excuse me. A lot of it, I think, is going to come off the tee. I think DMAC is going to have to ball out in that 10 jersey. He can't afford to miss anything, whether it's off the tee or off a drop goal. It's going to probably come down to a drop goal, honestly, I think late. It's probably going to be into Golden Point. I would love to see it be a 2021 battle. Who's going to score first in Golden Point? I would love to see the Chiefs through either Narawa or Sean Stevenson or hell, even Quinto Paya, run it down their throat for like a good 30, 40 meters, get them within range, and just have DMAC just take it in the slot and then drop it in. That'll be an interesting matchup. I think to open up the weekend, there's no better matchup. This rivalry has been insane the last couple of years, and I think it only gives better views to Super Rugby fans and rugby fans in general who are going to try to watch this matchup. It's a new Crusaders lineup. It's the same Chiefs. Who's going to play a little better than the rest, and who's going to take it over? Let's see. As for the Brumbies, I have them going by 8, 25-17 against the Melbourne Rebels. You know, a lot of people are counting out the Melbourne Rebels. I saw that they only had a 3% chance according to fan picks, I believe, a 3 or 7% chance in their pick'ems for fans, and I'm kind of disappointed. You know, the Melbourne Rebels have shown their quality. You know, I don't think a lot of people share this opinion, but if you look at what the Rebels bring to the table, they have a lot of active athletes on that squad. Carter Gordon is one of them. They have Vunivalu. They just brought in Salakai Loto. They have Andrew Kellaway. They have guys who could really ball out on that stage. They've gotten close. They've got Brad Wilkin. They've got Rob Leota. They've gotten like really, and I'm talking like within 7 points, Dallas Jackal level close to getting a lot more wins on that margin. And I don't see why people are counting them out. Yes, the Brumbies are always going to be very clinical. And yes, they're probably going to roll them early. But I think, like usual, the Rebels will find a way to claw themselves back from that first half deficit and get it close. Do I think they can get it to where they can at least tie the game? No, of course not. But if they do, that's great. But it's probably going to be a bonus point loss for them. They're just going to have to keep growing. They have to get feisty. They know their club is basically at an end. I think they're going to try to give their best performances that they've ever done. Expect the swan song for the Melbourne Rebels to be amazing, and the Brumbies probably to take this one out. As for the next one with the Blues versus the Drua, I have the Blues by 7, 21-28. You know, I think it's going to be more or less the same Blues team with the same Blues problems. Obviously, they have an open half lead. You know, most of the times they take their foot off the gas. A lot of things tend to happen. They tend to knock the ball on, tend to do a little too much. And what ends up happening? Oh, no. They either get really close to getting a loss or they choke and get blown out in the second half. So I expect nothing less, unfortunately, from the Blues, you know, especially with Vern Cotter at the helm, to try to really put the hammer to the Drua. But I think the Drua are going to eventually claw themselves back. Now, I did want to be a little bit crazy and put the Drua winning by 3. I would love to see that happen, but realistically speaking, I think I have to go with my gut on the Blues. You know, the Drua are probably going to crawl themselves out of that lead, just like the Rebels, a little late. But I think it's going to come down to really who can slot in the points on the corner. Now, the Drua can just run that ball on the wing. They'll do some crazy things, maybe a reverse again. They'll try to get some kicks. I don't know how they're going to do with Caleb Muntz out for injury, but they're kind of hampered in that regard. I thought Muntz was a baller last year. It's going to come down to really who can finish. And the Blues obviously have Mark Talea. They have Caleb Clark. They have ball in hand finishers. Now, the Drua can match them in physicality, but how long can that last? Like I said earlier, this is their benchmark match for the year. If they can beat the Blues, this is their ceiling for the whole year. That sets them up further. Now, they could still probably get that second place seed if they obviously run the table the rest of the year. But I think winning the Blues is going to have such a momentum for a now very hostile environment in Suva to really rally behind their team, their nation, and get their boys into a final that they rightfully deserve. As for the next matchup, you know, we have Landers versus Moana Pacifica. Unlike a lot of people who have the Landers penciled in, I don't. Okay. The Landers have been an interesting team the last couple of years. If this is the Landers team from 2018, 2019, then maybe. But this ain't the Landers team from those years. I got Moana Pacifica running them off the field in the zoo by 9, 26-17. I really think Nigel Allwong is going to have a day. I really think William Havili is going to help manage that field with Christian Leali'ifano. I'm not sure if he's out with injury or not, but somewhere. And the rest of that team, regardless of whether or not Levi Aumua is out, is gonna play the way they should be. Tana Umanga knows his rugby. We all know his playing career. We know his coaching career with the Blues has not been the greatest. But hey, I think he learns from a new team. He managed to rally those island boys, and they get ready to run the show in the zoo. That is going to be a very quiet Dunedin Stadium, and I can't wait to watch that game. I think that'll be one of the more interesting opening weekend matches that we're going to see. As for the last match, we have the Taz versus the Reds. Up DC and Darren Coleman and the boys. Up Max Jorgensen. I think the Taz are going to win by 5. Everyone's saying the Reds are going to run into that stadium and just take it over. I really think the Toss can do it 20-15. I think the Reds continue to fumble the bag off the tee and leave it to a Max Jorgensen finish out on the wing. It's going to be that or a Teddy Wilson pick and go. Someone is going to find a way. Angus Bell will not be denied a score. I think he's going to get in there. Dave Parecki has improved. I think it'll be a great close to the weekend. The Taz, I think, have been really counted out, especially in the later stretches of the season. DC doesn't have a lot to work with. I think that they're going to find a way to get passionate. They know they have a roster now. Maybe you did lose Nemani Nadolo, but I think he's still on the staff as a consultant. I think you can really elevate, especially with Jorgensen coming off the bench with injury. That guy is lights out. He'll be an interesting watch. Mark Nawani Tawase, this is kind of his farewell for Super Rugby. I think he's still going to continue to ball out in the way that he is. And yes, you have lost Ben Donaldson, but you still got guys on that roster in the backfield. Can't wait to see it. Jake Gordon, it's all on you. But that's going to be it for me this week, guys. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Peace.